Thank you. All right. Yeah. It's got a couple of my favorite words in there. Liberty, Americans, and young people. You guys are the future. You are, unfortunately, how many Gen Z do we have in the audience? I got good news and bad news for you. The bad news is that the boomers and everybody else has broken the world. The good news is it's going to be yours to build back, and you're going to be able to build it back better your way, not the way that Trudeau and Biden and Lagarde talk about when they say build back better. Yeah. The system is broken. The system is broken, the money is broken, and everything is unraveling. We are in absolutely historic times. There's an old saying that it's an old curse to say, may you live in interesting times. Well, we are in very interesting times right now. We are in what is called a fourth turning or an epoch shift, a once-in-a-century type of change. This happens again and again throughout human history. It's entirely predictable. We have these periods of mass shakeup. A lot of you are history fans. A lot of Liberty people are history fans. How many history fans here? Yeah. Because people who understand history understand that liberty is the right way. It's not a coincidence. People who understand these things understand what works and understand what is right. People who understand history also know that we have these times, these epic change times, cycles where the world changes. Power structures change, borders change, maps change, who we trust changes, and we're seeing it right before our eyes. Whether you've thought about these concepts before or whether you've read The Fourth Turning, it's obvious. You open your eyes and you see it. The world is changing very, very radically. If I had stood on this stage 3 years ago and told you what was going to happen, everybody would have thought I was crazy. Everybody. You would have never, ever believed if I said, you know, there's going to be a scientist who's going to tell you that you have to wear a political signal on your face, or that you can't go to your gym, or that you have to close your favorite restaurant. You would have said, no, not in my America. They can't do that in America. Or we're going to have government agents telling social media what is true. Or that we'll have elected officials who are censored widely in mainstream press and social media. You would have thought that's not possible in my America. You would have never imagined that they could shut down an entire country. You would have never imagined what they did. And they've done it. The change isn't over yet. The decade of the 2020s is not going to be marked by, oh, that was a couple weird years in the beginning, and then everything went back to the same way it was in 2017. No, it's gone. That world is gone. The world of 2019 and before is gone forever, and it's never coming back. And the advantage you have over the people who were building their business skills in the 70s and 80s and 90s is that you can build skills for the new world. Everyone else alive today built skills for a world that's gone. The world of 2019 and before is gone, and it's not coming back. And we are in a new world of radical change. We've seen incredibly radical change over the last 2.5 years that we could have never dreamed of. And it's not over. It's just getting started. We see the world breaking before our eyes. I went into a Chili's and the waitress said, we don't have any beef. This doesn't surprise anybody. Everybody in this room has similar experiences. Weird stuff. You order things and it doesn't work. There's long delays. The world is breaking because the system is broken, and this is a natural thing. This isn't an unusual thing. This happens when mature powers become bloated and inefficient, and they get replaced by new powers. CNN and the New York Times are out. Joe Rogan and TikTok are on the rise. The world is changing, and it's not over. The nth order effects, the second order effects, third order effects, change begets change, chaos begets chaos. Ukraine is not the final chapter. Ukraine situation is a result, and our unfortunate reaction is a result of the unfortunate reaction to COVID. And remember, COVID didn't close down a business. Don't let anybody ever say, oh, this business got closed down because of COVID, or I lost my job because of COVID. No, 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 no. Politicians are what caused the jobs. Politicians, the reaction of politicians is what caused. We cannot let people forget that. So in these times of epic change, it's going to continue. Our world is going to be equally unrecognizable or even more unrecognizable in 2 years and 3 years from now. We're in a time of change and chaos, and the ice is shaky beneath our feet, and everything is changing, and it's going to continue to change. There's going to be more situations like Ukraine. There's going to be tension with China and Taiwan or more. There's going to be increased economic turmoil. You can't print $9 trillion from thin air without having a reaction. There are costs to the radical actions that politicians took. We're just seeing them. And those costs cause more cost. We have supply chain and employment and economic and border and election and crisis after crisis. And then everybody is nervous, and we have anxiety, and we have people who are very, very easy to fool now because they've been fooled and it's part of their system. It's like the meme where you take out one chip from CNN, puts in somebody's head, and have you seen this meme? They put in the BLM chip and you take it out, and you put in the COVID chip and you take that out, and you put in the Ukraine chip and you put that in. Lemmings, robots, NPCs programmed by a system. And it's very, very dangerous because in this time of a fourth turning, we don't know what our world's going to look like. I tell you what it's not going to look like. It's not going to look like 2018. That's gone. It's going to look real weird and real different, just like today looks real weird and real different from a couple years ago. And it happened so fast and so significantly, we barely even notice. Don't pretend that now is normal. It's not normal. It was a travesty what they pulled on us. Absolute travesty, unacceptable. And here's why it's important. Because in a fourth turning, the world's going to shake out and it's going to end up somehow. How's it going to end up in 2025 and 26 and 2030? What does our world look like? Many of you will be starting families. You'll have children. What does the world of your children look like? It's going to go one way or another. It's either going to go down a path of our core values of human rights and freedom and voluntary interaction and free economics and a Bill of Rights that protects the individual, or it's going to go down a path of tyranny and central control and authoritarianism and central bank digital currencies and movement passes and social credit scores and boots on heads for a generation. Many of you younger folks don't even realize the freedoms you've already lost. When I was the same age as many of you, I would fly, and you know what I needed to fly? A ticket. And if I wanted to sell my ticket or give it to my friend, I could just give it to them, just like a movie ticket, and they could walk in. No ID, no metal detector. The TSA didn't exist. It shouldn't exist anymore. It shouldn't exist now. When I started as a financial advisor, you know what you needed to do to open an account? Call me on the phone and say, I'd like to open an account. And you had a week to pay. You could have bought Microsoft stock from me when I was a junior financial advisor. You could have bought Microsoft stock from me, say, hi, Bruce, I want to buy the stock. And I'd say, okay, I'll give you a week you can pay. I didn't need your social security number. I didn't need your date of birth. I didn't need all of this AML, KYC. But the thing is, this is the frog in boiling water. They have thrown this stuff, and a lot of younger people they think that's the way the world's supposed to be. That it's some sort of business thing that we have to have AML, KYC. We have to have authoritarians up in our business. And we have to have people patting us down at the airport or the world doesn't work. And if it continues, it's going to be radical, radical change for the worse. Because there are people in academia and the media and Hollywood and all of the Democrats and unfortunately half of the people who call themselves Republicans who subscribe to this view of centralized authoritarian control. They called it Build Back Better. It's personified in Fauci and the TSA and the drug war and centralized control and the kind of absolute evil that's being exported by communist China. The ideas that put faith in the state above the personal beliefs of the individual. I call it the Church of Woke. It's like a new religion, and not a fun one. It's a funny term, but it really is like a religion in many ways. It has high priests and heretics and official dogma, and it abandons logic for faith. and requires blind obedience. And I support everybody's feared in our freedoms. So we're going to go down one path or another. I'm optimistic. I think we're going to go down the path of freedom and individual rights, and I think we're headed for a great time in humanity. Not without a fight. There are a lot of, and I don't use the word evil lightly, but I can't think of a better word to describe it. I mean, we have people being harmed and killed because of the current system that we have. And as I mentioned, everything is broken, everything is shaky, everything is fake, starting with the money. A lot of this is a perfect group to ask this question. Why don't we shout out some problems with the United States government causes? Or no, just problems in the world. What do you see as problems right now? Go ahead, shout them out. National debt, ATF, every single thing. I loved it. This is the best group for this. Drug addiction. Every single thing. I could go through one by one, and there's a factor in every single one of these things. Even if you mention obesity, I could trace that back to fiat money. Every single thing you said. The three great religions of the world prohibit fiat money, and I don't think that's a coincidence. And I don't use this word evil lightly. But fiat is evil. It's actually evil. Why is it evil? Not because it robs people. It's the reason that the gas prices and the lumber prices and the food prices are skyrocketing. And it keeps people in poverty, and it causes great economic harm. And those things are bad. But the reason I use the word evil is because of what they do with it. It's not so much that they steal it from you and they impoverish you and they're going to impoverish your kids. And they scam you to take the money to give it to BlackRock and other cronies. That's bad. But it's what they do with it. And what they do with it is evil because they do not have accountability. In World War II, we had sound money. In World War II, war heroes would come to groups and they'd have to sell the public on the war. And they'd have to say, did you see what happened at Pearl Harbor? Let me show you some photos. Can I tell you what's going on with these folks called Nazis and why we must fight them? And they had to sell you on that. They had to sell you on World War II. After we were bombed in Pearl Harbor, they had to sell you on Nazis. Why? Because it was your money. And it was real money. They don't have to sell you anything now. They don't care about your opinion now. You are milk cows for the system. And they do not care whether you support it or not. And it doesn't have to be World War II. It can be any kind of whimsical nonsense to reward cronies and kill people around the world. And they can do it without accountability. They don't need a war hero or anybody else to give a speech. They just press a button. Boom. And your money is devalued, and they have billions and trillions to do whatever they want with. No speech, no accountability, no vote. They can give it to BlackRock to buy out a bunch of American homes and farmland. They can give it to for-profit prisons. They can give it to a domestic spying complex that spies on Americans. They can drone bomb people all over the world. They can have 20-year wars of aggression on countries that never even attacked us. They can bomb other countries into the Stone Age. They can drone bomb Americans. They can keep people in for-profit prisons over a forbidden plant because they don't have any accountability. They press a button and print and hit print. And it's actually evil. It's actually evil. It's responsible for real deaths. Millions of deaths. There's people who burned by phosphorus in our name because of this fiat system. There's people in cages right now that we pay sometimes 70 grand a year for, in cages because of a forbidden plant, because of this fiat system. Without this broken, phony fiat scam system, you would never tolerate this. If they had to come and give a speech and have a war hero give you a speech and say, please, please give me 70 grand. You say, why? Oh, cool, I can have a missile to kill some brown people. And you say, what'd they do to us? Nothing. It's to make more money for Halliburton. Or can I have 70 grand, sir? I want to put somebody in a cage for having a forbidden plant. You may be really, really against marijuana, but I don't think there's a single person in here who would give 70 grand of their own money willingly to put somebody in a cage over it. It's not the government's role. Nobody would tolerate this, but when they have a magic money printer, they can keep on printing. And this is where you get into total unaccountability and total evil, like we just saw. Anybody in this room would have voluntarily paid Fauci's $800,000 salary? Anybody in this room would have voluntarily paid for any of this? No. Absolutely not. The money's broken, they broke it. And they're breaking it enough that it's not going to be any money anymore. It's a scam. Any 5-year-old child would love the idea of saying, I'm going to print some money from thin air. I want to print money from thin air. If I could have a magic wand, I know what I'll do. I'll make money. That's what a 5-year-old would do. And many of the politicians have the narcissistic, immature mentality of the 5-year-old. And the power to print money is just too great. Again and again, we've tried and failed with central banks, Weimar Republic, Zimbabwe, United States a couple times. And it fails again and again. The temptation to print money for your cronies is just too great. Printing money from thin air is a really cool magic power for the people doing it. But eventually it catches up, and eventually it becomes not money. Money has certain properties, and it has throughout human history. And those properties aren't people in fancy offices get to tell you that it's money. That doesn't make something money. If it did, Zimbabwe would be the richest country in the world. I have $1 trillion in Zimbabwe money. It's sitting on my desk back home. That's not real money. It's a scam. And if anybody else did it, it would be considered a scam. If anybody else was issuing money from thin air, issuing something from thin air, calling it money and giving half of it to their cronies, that would be considered a scam. So the current money system, we went off of the sound money system in 1971, and the current system is totally and completely broken, and it has all of these other drawbacks. Now, the good news is that historically, as I said, politicians don't get to decide what money is. If they could, then they'd have even more power than they already do. Eventually, people decide. And throughout history, there's something called the Cantillon effect. Throughout history, people have gravitated towards the most scarce, most sound money. They didn't need Janet Yellen to tell them gold was gold 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Gold has properties of money. It's scarce, limited in supply. It's acceptable. It's universal. It's got some drawbacks. Every form of money has its advantages and disadvantages. But this gets us into cryptocurrency and specifically Bitcoin. Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin fixes these problems. We can see a world where we can have a separation of money and state the same way we had a separation of church and state. If I went into this group or I went into a group of 100 socialists or Democrats and I said, tell me your top 10 things government should do, this group would say nothing, 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 nothing. But even the things that you do think government should do, or another group might say healthcare or college or whatever, almost nobody would say monetary policy. I don't know anybody on the left saying, oh, we really need them in charge of money. I think even in their hearts they know that it doesn't work. Anybody can kind of see that this is a scam. So you could have an alternative form of money in the form of Bitcoin that the people decide. Because it is scarce, it's provably scarce. It's not something they can whimsically print and give to their friends. It is governed by the laws of math and code that everybody can read. Everybody can see the code, and it is a distributed system, which is very, very powerful. And I think distributed systems are the next level in sort of helping humanity. I'm working in politics now, and most people in this room are. And I really don't believe that there's anything we can do in politics. I don't think there's any elected office that anybody can hold that can do anything in the United States as powerful or as important as fixing the money. The root of all the problems is the money. All the policy in the world isn't going to do anything. You take drug policy, for example, the for-profit prisons, everything I just mentioned, drone bombings. Oh, I started to say even obesity. Even obesity, if you track back, you look at the Department of Agriculture and what Nixon did when we went off the gold standard and how it ruined the family farms and basically had government interfering to force farms to become larger and force less competition, which hurt the soil, all kinds of, just the kind of thing you'd imagine if you're not familiar with it. Government gets into things, they break it. They break everything. And they messed up our food system. And now we have corn syrup subsidies, because corn syrup is in everything because of corn syrup subsidies, because of the Electoral College. So everything government touches, even obesity, you can trace back. And you look at the pictures of people on a beach in 1970 versus people now. It's a real problem, and as crazy as it is, even that, you can blame a good chunk of it on government. Government breaks everything it touches. So we don't need them to decide what money is. Why do we really need these folks to decide what money is? They're not good at anything. They're not good at anything. If there was a federal department of dog watching, there's not a person in this room who would trust them to watch their dog. You really wouldn't. And you wouldn't want to bother. You'd have a bunch of forms and it would be a big pain in the neck, and they'd be closed 38 days and another 38-day holiday, and it would only be up until 2 o'clock, and you'd have to fill out forms in triplicate, and they wouldn't let you go in if your dog had an offensive name and all this other stuff. And you still wouldn't touch them, because you know that it would be costing the taxpayers $22,000 per dog, and 50% of the dogs would die. You legit wouldn't, you know it. We're joking, but you actually legit wouldn't trust the government to watch your dog. You know you wouldn't. You know you wouldn't. You'd trust anybody. Your crazy neighbor, your irresponsible friend from high school, anybody. You'd trust anybody over government. And these are the people who want to regulate the temperature of Earth. They want to decide what money is. Oh, I'll decide what money is. It's what I can give as my scam to my friends. No, I don't think so. Throughout human history, we, the people, have decided what money is. And we've gone to something that's scarce, that you can't print from thin air. I don't want that scam money. I chose a better form of money in 2013 in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is governed by the laws of math and code and transparency, and it's open and it's distributed, and nobody owns it and nobody controls it. And every 10 minutes, we have a block of mining that determines what the entire history of the chain says and determines what is true. It's certainty in an uncertain world. And I think it's time that we move beyond government controlling it and let people control. Let people decide. People all over the world, in every single country on earth, and in this very room and in this very city, everywhere on earth there are people who feel that Bitcoin is money, and it's in many cases their preferred form of money. So people have decided all on their own that this is a form of money and no government was needed. I don't think there's anything more important that we can do as activists, as people, as citizens, as Americans, as people who care about human rights and peace and freedom. I don't think there's anything more important than we can do than to fix the money. And we can do that in a very peaceful way. We can have the most important revolution in history by simply just stepping out of the old system and opting into a new system. Just refusing to use that scam money and decreasing its power and letting it phase out. Let it separate. People who want to use it can still use it. Just like church and state separated, we can separate money and state. And that, I think, would be one of the most important things we could do as a nation, and would lead to a new era of peace and control and the kind of accountability that I mentioned that we had in World War II and we had prior to 1971, where if government wanted some of your money, they had to make a solid case for it. There are things I would pay taxes for gladly. If my shores are invaded, if there are troops landing or threatening to land in my home in New Hampshire, I would pay to a collective fund to defend that. Of course, there's a lot of things we would, but when you don't have the accountability, you lose that, and violence and evil happens. So we're at this important time in history. It can't be underestimated. We're in this fourth turning. The entire world is changing. We have chaos and nth order effects on top of chaos and nth order effects, and it's going to be up to us, and especially up to you, to rebuild and decide what the world looks like. And we cannot allow it to go down this path of tyranny and central control and the model exported from China. Central bank digital currencies, by the way, what that enables the government to do is say, this is a digital currency, only it's issued directly from the Fed. So what that means is that they would have the power to shut your money off. just like Trudeau did when he went through Venmo and the credit card companies in Canada. Only they'd have the power to directly do it. We cannot allow that, and there's no reason to. It's your generation that is going to decide what the future is. And just as I don't think you're going to go with the old system of stock market where it takes 10 days to transfer things around, I think that the younger generation is going to demand that these things change. And it's a natural fit that new money will be adopted. And it's actually a moral imperative, because the current system, it's not only very, very harmful to a lot of people, as I mentioned, it causes great evil in the world. There are people dead now because of it, and there's people dying every day because of it. So sound money, beginning with what is money, why is money money, what properties make it valuable, and what is the proper role of government. And I think it should be nothing, just like everything else. I think we should have government entirely out of the money business. They don't do a good job. Let the people have control of it. So that's what I have to say about cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, and the money system. I think I can open it up for a couple questions, but thank you very much. Yes.
I had a concern about the long-term validity of most crypto, Bitcoin included, which was brought to my attention like a week ago, and I wanted to hear your potential response to it. So if you look at gold, it has like a lot of properties which make it very attractive as a currency. And Bitcoin shares many of those properties. The fact that it's impossible to destroy, the fact that it can be infinitely subdivided, either through melting or digitally. But gold also has a reason to want it in and of itself. Like it has use value in electronics and jewelry. And that to me seems to be the reason why gold is ultimately used in a free market as a currency. And I don't think that Bitcoin has that leg to stand on. And perhaps I'm missing something. What would be your response?
Yeah, it's a great question. So basically, what's the long-term viability of Bitcoin as money versus something like gold, which has its own intrinsic value? You can use gold in electronics and things like that. The metal value of gold is valuable. It is used in a lot of things, but it's only a very small piece of what the price of gold is. Most of the price of gold is gold as money. Most people buy gold, and especially pretty much everybody who invests in gold funds, ETFs, these kind of things, does it as an investment because of the money piece of it. So it's a much bigger piece of it. Now, I guess the answer is there is a lot of properties that it shares. One of the benefits of Bitcoin is that we're in a digital world now. So our lives are digital. Every single one of us is on the phone every day. We're living in some version of some sort of metaverse, whether it's chatting with our friends or jumping in online games. It's here to stay now. The world is digital, and that's not going to change. So we need money for a digital world. And one advantage of Bitcoin, it's provably scarce, and you kind of alluded to durability. One of the properties there's several properties of money. It's got to be portable. It's got to be accepted. Durability is one of them. It's got to be, that's why wheat and beef, everybody loves a good steak, but steak is not a good form of money. I don't want to get my pay in steak because it spoils, So you want durability. Gold will last forever. Gold coins, you could sit it in this room, and if nobody touched it, it'll be here 2,000 years. Bitcoin is quite durable. We don't think of digital things as strong, but Bitcoin is very, very, very strong. That math is there, and it will always be there. Now, there's other problems and drawbacks and things that can happen, but the Bitcoin itself is quite durable. So in a digital age, having a form of digital money makes sense. And one big advantage in a digital age that it has over gold is also one of gold's biggest advantages is also its biggest disadvantage. It's physical. And it's a little bit hard to settle, especially in bigger amounts. It's very hard to settle. If you want to move $100 million worth of gold, forget about it. It's a whole big thing. There's specialist companies out of Hong Kong and all kinds of insurance. It's extremely difficult. It took years for the US to get some gold that Germany owed us. It's very tricky when you get into big amounts. And in a chaotic world, a world of a fourth turning, a world of an epoch shift, you have to think about geopolitical turmoil. Who owns the gold? The people who have the soldier guard in the room with the gold in it, that's who. So you can just take it in a second. The tanks can come in and take all the gold. They can't do that with Bitcoin. if a nation like El Salvador has Bitcoin on their balance sheet, no tank can beat math. And that's important. So in a digital world, that's a big advantage. It's a big advantage. It enables a type of sovereignty over money that we've never seen before. Other questions? Yes, you in the white.
So another application or just something about like how gold is useful in technology, Bitcoin, the blockchain itself has applications. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm different than a lot of my friends in the space. Some people call me a Bitcoin maximalist, which is sometimes used as a derogatory term, sometimes a positive. Somebody said, woo. I like the term Bitcoin monetary maximalist. Jameson Lopp, my friend, I think came up with that one. I think Bitcoin is the best form of money. But I do also think that this invention that Satoshi invented, this thing we call a blockchain, a distributed ledger, I think is a valuable thing. And I think like any valuable invention, there will be other uses for it. And even if it's the Bitcoin chain itself, there are other interesting things. Securities, for example, right now you need, and if anybody's interested in this, there's literally 3 or 4 hours of content of me talking about this, but very quickly, the ledger system for securities is broken. It's very centralized. It relies on trusted third parties separate from the issuer, separate from your broker, and that causes clunky things like what we saw with AMC and GME. So the bottom line, ledger's broken, and it's real hard to move stocks. I can't send you a stock, even though I own a majority in a brokerage firm, and I've been registered as a stockbroker for 30 years, basically. I can't send you a stock from my phone to your phone. But with digital tokens, we will be able to do that. So I think there will be other use cases. I'm a big believer in experimentation, and I'm definitely a big believer in free markets. I don't want the government anywhere near any sort of regulation for any kind of cryptocurrencies. I want the free markets to do that. And I'm big in favor of letting people experiment with things, even stupid ideas and even things that are highly likely to fail. And even things that are terrible investments, as long as they're honest and properly disclose them. Yes? I'm not going to get to all these questions. I really wish. Go ahead.
So something that we have noticed is that Bitcoin has fallen victim to a certain extent to a boom-bust cycle. And a lot of people have theorized that this has something to do with major financial institutions and the exchanges getting involved and setting up a fractional reserve system of banking for Bitcoin, where a lot of the Bitcoin people feel that they own on exchanges is not maybe real. How does Bitcoin as a money overcome that banking system when we're starting to see where it's falling into the same cycle as everything else, and the powers that be have an interest in it failing?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a lot of talk about Bitcoin exchanges and other groups using kind of fractional reserves, and there's been a lot of problems recently with lending sort of derivatives and a lot of other coins, DeFi projects and things like that. But as far as Bitcoin specifically, it is a risk, but it's not so much a risk to Bitcoin. The Bitcoin protocol and the Bitcoin code does its thing every 10 minutes and doesn't know or care about the outside world. So there isn't really much that the banks can do that would affect Bitcoin. It could affect the externality of the price of Bitcoin, but here's where it gets good. The thing that prevents this being a real serious problem is the nature of Bitcoin itself. So these scammy banks can do their scammy games that they've done before in fractional reserve, and if Bitcoin gets big enough, maybe it'll be hundreds of billions of dollars that they're doing in this phony shell game. But eventually, if they're scamming and they're doing this nonsense, eventually reality will catch up and it will break. One big difference. Their buddies at the Fed aren't going to be there to bail them out this time. There is no Fed in Bitcoin. When they break, that's their problem. If you want to do scammy, stupid loans on Bitcoin, have at it. Bitcoin will not be there when you fail. There is no Fed. They're not going to have any meeting for you when you fail. Let them fail. I'm all for free markets. Let them do whatever crazy, stupid loans they want. Those banks who did those loans that you watch in the movie Big Short, where they were taking $400,000 homes in Fresno, selling them to $800,000 to a plumber who was making 60 grand, and then they were leveraging that and borrowing $17 million on that loan. That's what they were doing. That's their business. Where I have no problem with that. Where the problem, a real big problem I have, is that they stole $800 billion of our money that they printed from thin air to reward those goofball bankers for doing that nonsensical loan. If you want to sell onion-flavored ice cream, have at it. I don't think that's a great idea. But it's sure as heck not your business to come and say, well, ice cream nobody wanted my onion flavored ice cream. Can I have $1 trillion? No, you can't. And in Bitcoin, you can't. In Bitcoin, you're responsible for your own keys and your own mistakes. Let me get another one over here. Yes?
First of all, thanks for running.
Thank you.
To your Twitter Spaces the other day. It was informative.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you saw yesterday, BlackRock is teaming up with Coinbase. Yeah, and I sent it to him. I mean, I'm not surprised that like a shitcoin seller would team up with BlackRock. But I sent it to another friend of mine who's also into Bitcoin, and he said, Bitcoin is for enemies too. And it kind of caught me aback for a second, because it's kind of like this idea, like, they're eventually going to join you when they can't beat you. And so, on one hand, I was very opposed to it, that, I'm a shareholder activist. I fight BlackRock every single day. That's what I do. And so, that, it kind of bothered me when something that I love, like Bitcoin, BlackRock was getting involved. But on the other hand, I realized maybe if they're not so dependent on our fiat money, it'll correct a lot of the things that they take advantage of. So do you think that we should be, as more institutions that we hate start adopting Bitcoin as well, do you think that's a problem or is that a benefit? Because I'm not sure. I can go either way.
I say let them do any old thing. And this goes for governments too. Some Bitcoiners think it's a big victory for government. They say, oh, this other government, El Salvador did it, let's get a bunch of others. Here's another government who wants to do it. And a lot of people have said, oh, we need more Bitcoiners in government. I don't really want government to have anything to do with it. I'd rather have them entirely out of it. I'd rather have the people on the Bitcoin. But the good news is, whether it's government or some other kind of enemy, or BlackRock or anything, that's their deal. They can't hurt our Bitcoin. They're used to a world where they can bully us around and cheat and trick. You can't cheat math. They can't break our Bitcoin. They can do their stupid games, and we're probably going to come out ahead of them on it, because these nonsensical loan games that they did during the loan crisis, they just won't work in Bitcoin. So I'm of the belief that, it is money for your enemies. It is better money. It's a better form of money. It's a peaceful form of money. It's a voluntary form of money, and it solves the problems that this truly, truly horrible broken fiat system. And the fiat system's a new thing, by the way, 51 years in the United States. It's not like it's not like John Adams came up with this or something. Jefferson and a lot of founding fathers were completely against this. This is not, just because it has George Washington's picture on it, don't let it fool you. It has nothing to do with patriotism, and I'm out of time, unfortunately, for questions. It has nothing to do with patriotism. It's a scam. And if anybody else was issuing it as a scam, but we can do better. We don't need to use it. We have voluntary choice. This is our country. We have our own sovereignty. We can choose whatever form of money we want. And all the tanks in the world can't change our Bitcoin, and they can't take that from us. We cannot let this fourth turning go down the road of tyranny and centralized control. We must fight it. Decentralization is one of the great peaceful ways to do this. I really wish I could take all your questions, and unfortunately I got to run right back to New Hampshire, but please, please, please connect. My mobile number is very easily available. I'm very accessible on social media. Follow me right now on Twitter, Bruce Fenton. Follow my website. Let's keep in contact and keep the conversation going. You guys are the future. I'm so glad to have spent some time here. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.